IronCAD's sheet metal tools are built to be extremely fast and flexible to use. To get started learning them, we'll go to the Starter Catalog and then select down to the sheet metal folder with a double click. Then we'll go to the ribbon bar and select on the sheet metal ribbon tab to display the sheet metal tools. Next, I'll drag and drop out a piece of stock. This stock will come in at the default size we have set up and with the default thickness we have set up, both of which are customizable. We can then push and pull on the stock to adjust its size. In this case, I'll type 200, hit enter, and then I'll drag this other handle and type 80 and hit enter again. If we want to change the stock thickness, we can do so at the individual part level or at the default level for all new parts. At the individual part level, right click on the stock and select Part Properties, and then you can change the thickness and minimum bend radius here simply by typing in the new values, or you can select from the stock list by clicking Select a New Stock. In this case, I'll select Aluminium 1.5mm. It's worth noting you can also customize and add to this stock list as well. Now I'll click OK, and that will adjust our stock thickness. To change the default new stock thickness, go to Menu, Options, click on the plus button next to sheet metal, and then select Stock. Whichever stock you leave selected in this list will be your default stock used on all new sheet metal parts. And down here, it shows where the files are for customizing all the stock available. In the sheet metal settings here, you can customize other default options. Next, I'll drag and drop out a bend. Note there are multiple types of bends and multiple types of bends with stock. To get started, we'll look at the bend options. A normal bend will add to the size of the model. So you can see this is 80mm, and then it will add the bend onto the end of that. So the 80mm distance is this flat section, whereas the full distance to the outside of the part or to the inside of the part here is going to be bigger than 80mm. Alternatively, if we drop in an in bend, it will keep the inner dimensions. So the 80mm will now be going to the inside face. So if you're designing a box where the inner dimensions are the important ones, you might want to use an in bend, for example. An out bend will use the outer dimensions, so it'll cut all the way in, so that the 80mm now goes to the outside. So if you're designing a box that's 80mm wide, you could use an out bend on both sides, and you wouldn't need to worry about measuring the bend distance at all. Now the difference between bends and bends with stock is that with bends, the straight stock piece here is included, and some tools, like the miter tool, can only be used with bends and not bends with stock. If we add a bend with stock onto this other side, you can see that we have the bend and the stock as two individual items. The stock can be customized and push and pulled by itself, and much like dragging out a piece of plain stock here, you can also customize the cross section of a piece of stock when you drop it out in this way, or a bend with stock. Quick example, we'll edit this sketch really quickly, and you can see it's very easy to customize that. Whereas if you were doing the same sort of customization with a bend, you would generally want to do it with a cut. So we'd go into our IntelliShapes and we drag and drop out an H block or an H cylinder, for example, to cut away that geometry. Both are useful in different cases, but for using the miter tool, as mentioned earlier, you only want to use bends. Note you can still use the feature tools available in IronCAD, or most of them, with the sheet metal parts as well. So for example, I'm going to click down to this corner here, this edge, and add a chamfer, so that we can add a chamfer to that edge as a really simple, quick example. Now I'll delete those shapes and that chamfer, and go back to the part. Now let's look at the miter tool here. So for example, let's say we want to create a box. To do that, click the miter tool, click on the bend shapes you want to use for this box. So it's just that one, but if there are multiple, we want to select from the bottom up. Then click on the straight edges area and select the edges we want it to follow. In this case, if you select the face, it will select all the edges, but you can also deselect them afterwards if you want to. The only error that you sometimes may run into in this case is if you select the edge on the wrong line compared to what the initial bend edge is on, then it'll come up with this error you see here. They have to be on the same side of the thick blue line. You can then choose the setback value for the miter, click OK, and that'll create the mitered box there. Note, whenever you're making anything out of sheet metal, you can right click and unfold the part and see your flat pattern and your bend lines. When you go to create a DXF or a 2D drawing of this, you'll also get bend annotations and bend dimensions as well. For example, up by 90 degrees and the bend's 3mm. We'll then right click again and fold that back up. And for the moment, I'll actually delete the miter, and I'll go through and add in another outbend on top of this one. And then I'll add the miter again, and again select from the bottom up, so bottom bend up, and then select our straight edges and click OK. And as you can see, it's now added those extra bends to the miter. When you have created a mitered box like this, you can actually go in and edit the bends themselves on the original part of the miter, and it'll update the rest for you as well. So for example, if we stretch this up, the rest of the box will update. Or if we change the angle, the same thing. Now I'll delete this and go into more detail about how the sheet metal parts themselves work and how to change the angle and things like that, which we just did there. So let's drag and drop out a bend and have a look at the shape here. When we resize a bend, click down onto the bend, we click on this handle here, push and pull it up and down. This can be snapped using the shift key to other objects if we have them in the model, but if not, you can also right click and select edit bend stock length, which will be the straight or flat distance here. And you can choose the length display options as well. Or alternatively, you can right click and select edit distance from point, and then select a point, for example like the bottom here, and choose how far we want it to be from that area. In this case I'll type 30. Another important thing to note is that you can change the bend radius here. By default, it will use the minimum bend radius available for the part that we set up earlier in the options for the sheet metal, and that's 2.25, but you can customize this to a new size if you want to. For example, I'll change this down to 1.5, which will make that bend smaller. You can also change the angle of the bend using these handles here. The handle on this side will change this side of the bend, the handle on this side will change this side. This can be push and pulled randomly depending on the angle you're looking for, or just to try out different angles, but it can also be precisely sized as well, just by right clicking and selecting edit angle, and then you can type in a specific angle. For example, we'll type 80 degrees, hit enter. You can also hold down the Shift key to snap to specific angles as well. So for example, I'm snapping to a flat angle there. But if you have another part in the scene on a specific angle, you can snap to that angle, or you can right click and select parallel to edge or perpendicular to face, etc. to align it to specific other things or other items you have in your model. You can also adjust the length and size of the bend using the handles on the end, like that. And you can press this toggle button here to toggle on the corner reliefs. So you can see when you do toggle that, you can then cut back on the bend there. And you can also right click, go to the bend properties. Oh, sorry, not actually bend properties there. I'm wanting to click on this. We've actually already got it. We just hold down the Shift key and go back to there. That's what I was looking for, right clicking on the wrong handle. I wanted to edit the corner relief, and I can drop this back, for example, by 2 mil, like so. In this case though, I'll just undo that with my Control Z, and then I'll snap this back over to here using the Shift key. Now there are various other options available in the tools here, which I'll go into shortly. So for example, we can use a seam, like so, or we can use a hem as well, like that. In this case, I'll undo both of those though. And I'll resize this one back to 90 degrees. So I'll right click, select edit angle, and simply type 90 and hit enter. Next up, I'll drag and drop out another bend, place it onto here, and I'll hold down the Shift key and snap that to the top of the next bend there. Now we're going to look at the closed corner tool. So if we don't have a miter and we just have an example like this, and they could be different bends, and we want to close the corner, we can click Add Closed in the menu up here. Now we can choose the type we'd like to have, whether it's overlap, underlap, or just a butt join. In this case, we use the butt join. We select onto the bend, and it'll automatically select the next one closest. Choose the gap we'd like to leave, and then choose whether or not we'd like an open bend region. In this case, we'll leave no open bend region, and then click OK. And that'll close up the corner there. Oops, I've actually added that relief earlier here. Let me just turn that one off. And as you can see, that will close up that corner there. Because they are different bend sizes, this one's 1.5 mil and this one's 2.25, it does its best to match how they should go together based on their sizes. If, for example, though, we delete this one and we have one with the same bend size, it'll join together a bit nicer there. Oops, I've actually already got a closed corner on that one. Let me just go in and delete that closed corner from our settings there. And we deleted the miter earlier, or I just cancelled it. And so I'll go in and click Add Closed, select on this one, and you can see now it'll be a much nicer join there because they are the same size. Okay, deleting that now. Let's go in and have a look at a few of the other tools up here. So now I'm going to go through these in order. So the first thing we'll do is use the Create Loft tool. So to create a sheet metal loft, you need 2 sketches to create the loft from. So go to the Sketch tab and we'll click Create a Sketch on the XY plane. And this is how you, for example, create a circle to square profile out of sheet metal. So the first thing I'll do is create a center rectangle here, like so. And I'm going to make this one 200 by 200. Hit enter. Then what I'm going to do here is create a fillet on the corners, which will be, in this case, 10 mil. Hit enter there, and then I'm going to select lock radius, click the corners, click each corner, lock that down. And I'm going to do another center rectangle, but this time at the bottom of this edge down here. I'm going to make this one really small. We just need some sort of gap so that the sheet metal will know the type of shape it needs to form. So you can see up the top left there, I'm going to press the tab key and just type 1mm, which is going to leave a 1mm gap, and then I'll press enter. Now I'll use the trim tool to trim away all the extra lines, like so. So we just have the gap there. Now I'll click OK to finish that sketch off, and then I'll activate my triball and right click and drag this sketch upwards. I'm going to select copy here, one at 250. Click OK. Deactivating the triball now, and I'm going to select onto my top sketch, right click and select edit cross section, or just edit in this case. Now what I'll do is draw a center radius circle. So I'll draw this here, and I'll choose what size I want it to be. In this case, I'm going to choose for it to have a 70mm radius, so I'll just press the tab key and then type 70 and hit enter. Next, I can go ahead and cut the same sort of cut I made earlier. So I'll do that by zooming in here and just drawing straight up lines from the other two lines, our 2 points we've got on our earlier shape. With that done, I can use the trim tool again, trim away everything we don't need, which is now all the lines in the model except our circle. Like so. Now I'll click OK to finish. Now to use the sheet metal loft tool, select create loft. Then select the two sections. It's good to select in the same approximate place on each section. So select here and here. And then we can choose how we'd like these to join together. So in this case, for example, we can choose whether or not we'd like them to have a press bend, like so. And if we want them to have a press bend, how many bend lines we want to have. So currently there's 5. We can make there 7 if we want to. Or we can make there less, of course, as well. Make there 3. And then in this case, let's make there maybe about 4. And if we want to, we can click on that preview button, click it on and off to refresh our preview, and then just click OK. And that's going to generate that shape for us. And of course, at any stage, you can still unfold this like any other sheet metal part. And I'll fold it back up. Next up, let's look at the sketch bend tool. If we have a piece of blank stock here, and actually we've already got one sitting here, so we'll use the one we've got. We can create a sketch on here and then use it to create our bend. So for example, this is going to be a relatively simple example of using this tool. I'm going to create a sketch on this face. And I'm going to do a 2-point line here. And another 2-point line here. And click OK. And make sure it goes past both ends of the geometry. Then back in my sheet metal tab here, click on the sketched bend tool, where I can select the face, which is this face. That's the sketch face that we're using. The sketch is actually already selected, so click on this one, but if you haven't selected it, you can click create 2D sketch. Now we'll define the fixed geometry, what stays still, which is this here. And we've got bend all lines here, that's okay. And we want to select our bend lines. So I'll select this line. Wherever the red highlight is what you're currently on. And then I'll select this line as well. So you can see on each line, we can customize their angle. So for example, I'm going to make this second line a different angle of maybe 45 degrees. You can also choose the direction they go and what bend radius they use, so on and so forth, but I'll leave them all as default for now. Next, I'll click OK. And as you can see, that'll then use those lines to bend up our piece of stock. So you can, for example, have just a completely flat piece of stock and draw a complex amount of lines that you just click one button and they'll all fold up together. Next, we'll look at the cut sheet metal tool. With the cut sheet metal tool, you can use other shapes to cut away sheet metal and other parts and things like that. So for example, I'll right click, drag and drop out a block and select drop as part. I'm going to draw this block so that it's quite big and cuts through a lot of the sheet metal here. Now if I select in order, so hold down the shift key and select sheet metal part first, then the cut part, this will become available and I can select cut sheet metal. And what it'll do, if I now right click and delete that block, or at least hide the block, we can see it'll now cut that away from the sheet metal part. And it'll of course also include that in the unfold as well. I'll delete this part for now. Next, we'll look at the forming tool. So the forming tool allows you to create a sheet metal forming shape from regular shapes. So let's go over here to the regular shapes and drag and drop out a block. Again, right click, drag and drop out. And I'll do drop as part. And I'll extend this one out to be a little bit bigger. As a really simple example, this can obviously be much more complex. As a really simple example, I'll add a slot onto the top of this. And then on this slot, I'm going to right click and edit the feature options and put a draft on this of 2 degrees. And click OK. And instead, I'll now draft that inward. Now what I'm going to do is create the sheet metal forming tool. So to do that, we just click on forming tool here. Select on the stopping face, which is going to be this. That's where it stops. And then the faces to remove, if we want to remove faces, for example, will be this face. And then we click OK. And then we just drag this into our catalog, and that becomes our forming tool. So, for example, I'll move it out of the way so we can see what's going on here. Now, if I drag this out onto my sheet metal part, it will use that to form the sheet metal. As an example, if I go in here and then edit that forming tool, so right click, edit tool option, I can now delete that face that's being cut there, click OK, drag that tool into my catalog again, drag it out again, and now this time it'll leave that bottom face there. As mentioned earlier, you can customize this in far more detail than we have here. And as a really simple example, let's add a blend to the top of this, add it back into the catalog again, drag and drop it out, and now you can see it again, it's a different forming tool there. For now, I'll delete these. And we'll go have a look at the bend notch tool. So the bend notch tool allows you to create a notch in any bends, which can sometimes be useful for manufacturing. So for example, click on the bend notch tool, and then we'll just select the bend faces to add the notch to. You can add circular or triangular. In this case, we'll add triangular. And we'll add a depth of maybe just 1.5 mil. Then we'll click on the bend, like that one there. Click OK. And oops, actually I select on the wrong side there. And I didn't have a notch width, which I was meant to have. And we'll click OK. And you can see that'll now, I'll just delete our earlier bend notch, which is just telling us that that notch has still failed. Because I am going back and forth and deleting random stuff here in very, very random order, I've got a few problem features there. But you can see that'll then create a bend notch there for us. So if we unfold, we'll now have a bend notch that aligns with that bend line perfectly there. I'll fold that back up, and I'll go through that one again so it's easier to see what I'm doing. So do bend notch, select on the bend, click OK, and that'll create the bend notch there. We can also use the corner relief tool. In this case, we actually want to have, we need to have a corner, a mitered corner, for example. So what we'll do is we'll just miter this around. So click Add Miter, bend shape's going to be that, straight edges will be that, and we'll hit OK. And that's OK. Like so. And now, we'll go in here and select Corner Relief. Click on our model and select Corner Relief. And you can see there's now a highlight available for us to click on there for a corner relief. And I'll make this one just 3 mil circular relief. Click OK, and it'll add a relief to that corner. We've already been through the closed corner option earlier, and I can now delete that corner relief. I've gone ahead and deleted the geometry that it was assigned to. And let's go in and have a look at some of the other tools. So we've gone through the Add Miter tool. The next two tools are the Convert Solid Surface Flat Pattern from Faces and the Convert to Sheet Metal Part. So these are when you either import geometry from someone else, or for example you have 3D geometry that isn't sheet metal that you want to use as sheet metal. So I'm going to drag and drop out a block here, and then quickly add some blends to this block. Like so, make that one 5mm, make this one 5mm, maybe we'll make this one a bit bigger, we'll make it 10mm. And then we'll copy this block along here at a random distance in this example. Like so, and add a blend to the bottom here. Now what these tools enable us to do, so the flat pattern will enable us to create a flat pattern from these faces. And the flat pattern from faces sometimes does more complex geometry than the convert to sheet metal part is able to do. So when you have a more complex thing you need to flatten. In this case, we'll do both though. So we'll select this, and now we'll select a face, and it'll automatically connect all the faces it can to that face. So anything that's smoothly connected there. Next we'll choose the stock. In this case I'll change to a 1mm aluminium, and we'll click OK. And that'll then create a flat pattern of that stock. That's the flat shape we need to wrap around that. Alternatively, with the convert to sheet metal part tool, it'll actually convert it to a folded up sheet metal part using the sketch bend. So if we click on the face this time again, and change this to the 1mm stock as well, and then click OK, you can see that's now generated in place a sheet metal part. So we can delete the old part, and we have a sheet metal part generated in place there for us, which we can unfold and get the bend lines and bend dimensions. Lastly, we'll go into a few of the other tools available in the catalogs, and before we then go into a 2D drawing and the few different options that are available there. Another option available in the stock list is curved stock. If you have a complex curve that you need to create out of sheet metal, we can drag out the curved stock and then right click on the curved stock IntelliShape when it's yellow, so double click down to there, and then edit the cross section. And you can see this cross section is currently a straight line. We can actually customize this to be any shape we like. So for example, if we need this to be a spline from here, we can create the curve and just make this one tangent so that it at least lines up nicely to there. And we can get rid of the straight line if we want to as well. Click Finish Shape, and that'll create that curve from the stock. And with the curved stock, it can be push and pulled in this area to adjust its size, like so. And you can also right-click and just select Edit Curved Stock Length if you want to choose a specific length for the overall stock. The conic stock does what is somewhat similar to our Loft stock from earlier. We can drag and drop that out, and then we can customize the cone here. I'll delete this, we'll just move it out of the way of the flat sheet for now, and we can right click and select Edit Radius. If we want to type in a specific radius, we can choose outer, midplane, or inner radius. Do an outer radius of 70, and we'll right click on this one and make this one's outer radius 40, for example. And then also drag these handles to rotate the full 360 degrees, or whatever portion of it you'd like to use if you want to right click and edit the angle, for example, to 45. Deleting that for now, the Add Stock tool simply adds a piece of stock onto the end of your existing stock. So for example, if we drop it here, it'll just add a flat piece onto there. And the same over here. Just adding an extension piece on. If you have used a bend, which isn't available to edit as a stock piece, for example, it can be useful to add a piece of stock like that. One other tool we'll go into here before we go into our 2D drawings is just the Custom Profile tool. So this is good for editing the holes that are cut in flat pattern mode. So you can see here, if we drag and drop this out onto this bend, it'll actually cut a shape in the flat pattern. So that shape will generally be very hard to draw. If we tried to draw that in 3D, it would kind of be a combination of two cut cylinders. And so you can see here, if we right click on this, we can actually select edit cross section in flat. That'll unfold the part, enable us to customize this shape in the flat mode. So for example here, I'll draw a new shape like this, and maybe add some fillets to the end, and draw a shape that would generally be pretty hard to create any other way. Click OK, and then it'll convert that shape into 3D with the sheet metal folded up. Now let's delete this part and go over here and make another simple box like we did at the start, and with that box we'll then go into a 2D drawing. A box is just a good simple example of how to set up sheet metal. We use 1mm stock, and then we'll drag and drop out an outbend. Drag that up, and I'll precisely size it by right clicking, selecting edit distance from point, and saying we want from this point that to be exactly 50mm. And then I'll drag and drop another outbend here, and it's worth noting you don't have to drop on the exact edge. You can drop anywhere here and it'll snap there, and you press this arrow if you'd like to flip it or change the angle by 180 degrees. Now we'll push and pull this. We can hold down the shift key and snap to a point like the midpoint there if we want to, but in this case what I'll do is simply actually what I can do here is another interesting thing to know is we could, for example, snap to that midpoint and then snap to our own midpoint of our stock like that to make it a quarter of the length. The other thing we can do here is we'll then go in and add our miter. So we'll click bend shapes, remember from the bottom up, and then to the straight edges will be all of these. Clicking OK, we've then created our box there. And we'll delete that extra part we had sitting there, and we can now right click and unfold that. It's always good to unfold before you go into the drawing, so the unfold configuration is generated there. As you can see there, the hidden unfold configuration. And now we'll go into a drawing. So there are two main ways to create drawings in IronCAD, using the IronCAD draft software or using the IronCAD drawing software. For manufacturing drawings, the most popular one is the IronCAD drawing side, but IronCAD draft side is also popular as well. So it's up to you what you'd like to use, and I'll show you both here. To start with, we'll go to the IronCAD drawing side. So let's click new drawing using default template. And this will use this template here. You can see we can now create drawings of our model. I'll do a top front right view from up here. And click OK. And place that view there. And we'll use a precise view for that. And well, for the new view, we'll actually make this one precise. Or if we want to, we can right click and we can do a shaded rendering of that as well, like so. And maybe I'll just reduce the scale of this one a little bit to maybe, oops, that's very small. Maybe 1 to 10 or 1 to 3, something like that. Now we'll bring out the unfolded view. So to bring out the unfolded view, change the configuration from default to the unfolded sheet metal part configuration there. And then we'll click OK. And then we'll just press the arrow keys on the keyboard to change the size and click OK to place it. You can see we now get the bend lines and bend dimensions. If you'd like to send this to a laser cutter, for example, you can right click and just select export and then choose 1:1 DXF. You've got various options there available for you. One thing worth noting is that, of course, any changes you make at all in 3D will automatically be updated in 2D for you. So say whether it's a new job that comes along that's using a similar shape, or it's the same job and a change is needed, we can go in here, drag and drop out a shape. So in this case, for example, I'm going to drag and drop out an H cylinder and put it onto our base. So we have a hole cut through the base there. And then I'll go back into our drawing. And now that's going to automatically update the drawing there if we click OK and approve the update. We can, of course, add any dimensions or anything else like that we might need in our drawing. And oops, press the wrong button there. I want to click on Smart Dimension there, so dimension that diameter. And then we can, of course, dimension any other line we want to in our drawings, or if we want to even go from end to end on our stock size, we can hold down the shift key and select end to end on the stock size that we'll need available in that flat pattern, and so on and so forth. The other option is to use the IronCAD draft environment. So we'll go back into our drawing here and use the IronCAD draft environment, pressing this button up here. New Casa draft. This will then open up the IronCAD draft environment, which is a completely separate 2D drafting environment, which is a more traditional kind of drafting environment as opposed to the paper space drawing environment as we were in before. So both are available depending on your needs. For example, here in this case, if we just wanted a quick one-to-one DXF, we could go in here and do the unfolded view, and we'll choose the top view, or we can flip it here and then choose the primary view. Then in options, we'll bring in our bend lines, bend line annotations, and then click OK. Click to place our view, and it'll bring in those bend dimensions and bend lines as well, and they'll be on separate layers by default, so that we have those set up and we can just save as right now as many different DXF versions from many different years to send them ready to go for laser cutting and so on and so forth. And you can also produce paper space drawings here like you can on the other side as well, depending on which option or which way of doing things you're used to. And in both of those drawing sides, any changes in 3D will automatically populate into the 2D side as well. Hope that's helped you learn some of IronCAD's sheet metal tools, and of course we're always happy to hear questions, so if there's any questions at all, feel free to email us or call us. Thanks!